Hey man, are you okay? Are you happy? Sugar. What do you mean? I said, are you happy?
He imagined someone visiting a parent's grave, kneeling quietly in remembrance while trucks thundered past only a few feet away, covering them in dust and exhaust. Then another possibility occurred to him. These roads were probably built by locals. The people who paved this stretch of asphalt might even be descendants of the very families buried here. As silly as the idea sounded, it eased his mind. If that were true, then the road wasn't some faceless force sacrificing history for convenience. The cemetery's neighbors had made the decision themselves. It wasn't Simon's place to judge. The road existed because the people who lived here had wanted it that way. Although, looking around, he wasn't entirely convinced they'd had much choice. The cemetery seemed enormous. He had turned onto this road nearly half a mile earlier. Yet the endless rows of gravestones still crowded the left side of the pavement. Marker after marker stretched onward, packed together so tightly they resembled tourists, leaning over one another to glimpse a spectacle. That's an awful lot of graves, for a place with only one road, Simon thought. He'd intended the observation as a bit of dark humor. Instead, the words sounded strangely ominous inside his own head. The road curved, his headlights swept away from the pavement and spilled across the cemetery. Hundreds of tombstones emerged from the darkness, silent, motionless, each one standing watch over someone who had once laughed, spoken, dreamed, someone who had lived an entire life before ending beneath the earth. One day every trace of them, their work, their voice, their memories, would disappear. All that remained was a carved stone marking the place where time had finally claimed them. Simon shook his head sharply, trying to banish the thought. He reached for the radio and pressed the seek button. Static hissed through the speakers as the tuner searched for a station with a usable signal. What is wrong with me tonight? He wondered. Normally, a cemetery wouldn't send his imagination spiraling like this. He tried thinking about happier things. His niece and nephew waiting excitedly for him. The outrageously ugly Christmas sweaters his sister undoubtedly couldn't resist buying. But every pleasant thought was interrupted by the same image. The old church. He could picture it with perfect clarity. The stained glass windows glowing like fire inside the massive shadow of the building. Except now, its darkness wasn't empty. It was filled with gravestones, and that shadow continued spreading, growing larger, until it seemed ready to swallow the entire world. At last, the silence broke. The radio locked onto a station halfway through a Beatles song. The reception was still sprinkled with static, but it was clear enough. Cellophane flowers of yellow and green. Suddenly someone is there at the turnstile. The girl with kaleidoscope eyes. The familiar Beatles tune slowly began to calm Simon's nerves. He settled deeper into his seat, only then realizing how tense his body had become since leaving the gas station. But the comfort lasted only a heartbeat. Suddenly, a wave of icy terror shot through him, as he distinctly heard the radio sing, "Guess who's going to die?" It's Simon. His body jerked upright, and his eyes snapped toward the radio as though staring at it would somehow confirm what he'd just heard. Yet the music continued normally. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The song played exactly as it should, making the horrifying words seem impossible. That isn't what I heard, Simon muttered under his breath, his voice trembling, as John Lennon's familiar vocals drifted peacefully through the speakers. Simon gradually convinced himself it had simply been a trick of the static. The crackling signal, combined with the eerie atmosphere of driving beside an endless cemetery after dark, had probably twisted the lyrics into something his frightened mind wanted to hear. People who think the radio is speaking directly to them are crazy, he reminded himself. Get a grip. Since when are you afraid of the dark? Before he could fully settle his nerves, The GPS interrupted the song. In 1 mile, continue straight on an unnamed road. Simon shot the device an irritated glare. For a split second, he considered smacking it in hopes of fixing whatever strange glitch had caused it to stumble over its own words. But he forced himself to stay calm. Taking a slow breath, he reminded himself that although the voice occasionally stuttered, the GPS was still tracking his location correctly, and that was what truly mattered, even if it insisted on giving pointless instructions, like telling him to keep driving straight when there was nowhere else to go. The thought only made him more uneasy. The cemetery still stretched endlessly beside the road, its rows of gravestones resembling jagged teeth, disappearing into the darkness beyond his headlights. Somewhere along the drive, the distant glow of the interstate had vanished without him even noticing. Then another unsettling realization crept into his mind. The road felt narrower than before. Earlier, he had doubted two trucks could squeeze past each other. Now he wasn't even sure two ordinary cars could manage it without one pulling onto the shoulder. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Wait, when did graves start appearing on the right side of the road too? His breathing quickened, and his pulse pounded inside his ears. This is ridiculous, he thought. It's just a country road running through the biggest cemetery I've ever seen. Another thought immediately followed. When did it get so dark? It seemed impossible that dusk could have disappeared this quickly. Only moments ago there had still been light lingering on the horizon, yet now the night felt complete, swallowing everything beyond the reach of his headlights. Nothing about this place felt right anymore. A sudden blast of cold air brushed across the back of his neck. Simon stiffened. Every window was closed, and the air conditioning wasn't running. Then another sensation hit him. A sickening smell of decay slowly filled the car. The exact same rotten stench that had drifted from the church when its enormous doors had begun to open. That never happened, Simon told himself. It was only a daydream. The vision at the gas station had been nothing more than his imagination. But the reassurance died instantly in his throat. A strangled gasp escaped him as his eyes drifted to the rearview mirror. The church was there, vast, impossible, towering directly behind his car as though it had been chasing him all this time. Its enormous shadow stretched over the road, swallowing his vehicle whole. Terror exploded through Simon's body. His hands jerked violently on the steering wheel, and the car swerved before he managed to wrestle it back into its lane. He could already feel the irresistible urge to look into the mirror again, to make sure what he'd seen was real. Before temptation could win, he let out another frightened grunt, and slammed the mirror with the back of his hand, knocking it clean off the windshield. It struck the passenger side window with a sharp crack, ricocheted onto the seat, then tumbled into the footwell. As it fell, its fractured surface caught the headlights for a split second, reflecting a broken image back at him. Simon fought to steady his breathing. He eased his foot off the accelerator and loosened his aching grip on the steering wheel. The Beatles song faded in and out beneath a sea of static before disappearing completely, leaving nothing but the soft hiss of white noise filling the cabin. Then the GPS spoke again. In 1/4 mile, continue straight on unnamed damned road. Simon reached toward the radio, hoping to drown out the malfunctioning voice. But something on the road ahead instantly stole his attention. A long, dark streak cut diagonally across the pavement. As his headlights illuminated it, the trail shimmered with a deep crimson sheen, a ragged ribbon nearly 2 feet wide stretching off into the darkness. Someone must have hit a deer, Simon thought, instinctively slowing the car while scanning both sides of the road. It crawled away after being struck, but the trail kept going and going far longer than seemed possible. In 1/10 of a mile, straight on unnamed road. Would you shut up? Simon snapped at the GPS. Just then, he spotted a motionless figure slumped against one of the gravestones lining the right side of the road. As his headlights swept over it, his stomach dropped. It wasn't a deer. It was a woman. Someone had struck her with a vehicle and left her there to die. In 50 feet, stay. Ignoring the GPS completely, Simon slammed the car into park and threw open the door. He rushed around the front of the vehicle toward the crumpled figure lying beside the gravestone. Her body was twisted unnaturally among blood-soaked scraps of what had once been a white dress, now torn apart and stained with dirt after being dragged for what looked like nearly a quarter mile. His trembling fingers fumbled through his pocket as he pulled out his phone to call 911, though deep down he already knew the truth. No one could survive after losing that much blood. Even so, refusing to accept it without trying, Simon knelt beside her and reached toward her neck, desperately searching for the faintest sign of a pulse. Instead of warm flesh, Simon's fingers met something hard, uneven, and brittle. Tiny legs immediately crawled across his skin. Startled, he yanked his hand away, accidentally knocking the figure's head backward. Tangled strands of hair slipped aside, revealing not the face of an injured woman, but a grinning skull. Yellowed bones stared back at him, through scraps of dried, leathery skin that still clung stubbornly to the remains of the corpse. Dirt from the grave coated its body, and what Simon had mistaken for a white dress was nothing more than a decaying burial shroud. Inside the hollow skull, faint clicking noises echoed as unseen creatures scattered deeper into the darkness. Horror flooded through him when he noticed a large beetle crawling across the back of his hand, making its way toward his sleeve. Simon screamed and stumbled backward, violently shaking his arm until the insect flew off into the night. At his feet, the corpse rustled beneath its tattered shroud. He instinctively glanced down, expecting more insects to emerge, but instead his phone slipped from his numb fingers. The corpse was moving. One rotting hand slowly reached up and gripped the nearby gravestone before the decayed body began dragging itself upright.